You are about to hear a story no one was ever meant to tell. A story buried beneath wealth, power, and the cultivated arrogance of men who believed themselves untouchable. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the dim glow of a candle. Lit plantation study in central Virginia, late on the night of November 6, 1860. The air is thick with smoke, the sweet, earthy scent of tobacco curling around the polished wood, clinging to every surface. Outside, the world is asleep, but inside a man is celebrating. Not quietly, not with subtlety. He believes himself untouchable, shielded by birthright, social order, and the illusion of control. He is Marcus Havford, a man whose fortune was built on other men's suffering, whose hands have never known honest labor. He lifts a fine Cuban cigar to his lips, savoring every bitter, intoxicating nuance, unaware that tonight, the very instrument of his indulgence has been transformed into a weapon. In this world, appearances are everything. The veneer of civility masks brutality, and respectability is built on fear. Yet fear can be inverted. Fear can be learned, understood, and used. And there is one man in that room who has done exactly that. Benjamin, Benjay, born into bondage, trained in the art of tobacco, yet educated in secret, forbidden knowledge stolen in whispers and shadows. He moves with a precision born of necessity, unseen yet always observing, absorbing everything: the colonel's habits, his weaknesses, the rhythm of his arrogance. Knowledge is power, the ability to manipulate without detection, to turn a tool of indulgence into an agent of inevitability, is mastery. And tonight, mastery will speak louder than words. Benj has watched, calculated, and waited. Every smile he has offered, every motion of service, has been a mask, an invisible scaffolding supporting a structure of vengeance no one could imagine. The house is quiet except for the crackle of the fire and the distant sound of wind brushing the trees. The colonel swirls his brandy, ignorant that every sip, every inhale, has been meticulously prepared over months to bring him closer to a slow, inevitable reckoning. He does not see the trap. He does not see the calm, steady hand that orchestrates his undoing. And here, my friend, is where we begin to descend. This is not simply a tale of murder. It is a story of suppressed knowledge, of psychological mastery, of invisible power bending the seemingly unbreakable will of men. It is the first lesson: power is never what it seems, and the instruments of your downfall are often those you hold closest. Tonight, we will explore the shadows behind Buckingham County, the secrets of trust betrayed, and the forbidden knowledge that can turn subjugation into absolute dominion. Lean in, the smoke curls around your mind now. You are no longer just a spectator. You are entering a world where truth is dangerous and every revelation demands vigilance. Benjamin was not born with power. He was born under chains, under the suffocating weight of ownership, of being counted as less than human. Yet from the moment he could observe, he began collecting something far more dangerous than wealth or social standing: information. Every whispered conversation between overseer and colonel, every drunken boast or private boast in the candle-lit study, was a thread in a web he would one day weave into inevitability. He learned that knowledge can be invisible, that it can infiltrate the mind of a master and seed doubt without ever being seen. He learned that a man's pride is often the key to his destruction, and that subtlety is the most deadly weapon a servant can wield. His education was secret, illicit, and meticulous. His mother had stolen scraps of books and newspapers from the plantation and risked everything to teach him to read. Knowledge, she whispered, is a weapon. Use it wisely, or it will destroy you. She died when he was 12, leaving behind more than grief. She left him a map of the mind, the tools to understand the mechanics of fear, deception, and control. Benjamin carried this in silence, teaching himself what he could not openly learn: the properties of plants, the lethal secrets hidden in the woods and gardens of Virginia, the subtle art of manipulation. He studied poison not with the curiosity of a chemist, but with the precision of a soldier preparing for battle. He learned the body's weaknesses, how the heart reacts under pressure, how a man can be made to suffer without the world noticing, how death could be cloaked in inevitability. Every day he practiced patience. Each cigar he rolled, each leaf he selected, was a rehearsal for an act no one could imagine. He watched the colonel's routines, the way he poured brandy, the angle he held a cigar, the cadence of his breathing in moments of anger or celebration. Every pattern was noted, every habit catalogued. There is a kind of power in invisibility, in becoming part of the scenery, while secretly controlling it. Benjamin had become a ghost in the halls, a shadow in the light, the keeper of secrets no man should ever entrust to another. Tonight, that preparation comes to fruition. Every detail has been refined, every variable accounted for. The colonel's arrogance, his ignorance, his trust, all are components in a system of precision Benjamin has been building for months. This is more than revenge. This is a study in control, in transformation, in bending inevitability to one's will. And as he steps into the study, carrying the cigars, there is no hesitation. There is no fear. There is only the calm inevitability of a man who has mastered the tools of life, death, and power in silence. Lean closer. The walls are listening. The fire is watching. And in the quiet, Benjamin's control stretches further than anyone in that house, or perhaps in the world, could possibly imagine. The study door creaked as Benjamin entered, a quiet presence against the roaring fire and the thick, tobacco-scented air. Colonel Hafford was already there, his shoulders heavy with the arrogance of men, convinced of their invincibility. He had returned from the courthouse, flushed with the illusions of power and privilege, certain that the world could never touch him. In his hand, he held a brandy glass, swirling the amber liquid as if to shake reality itself into submission. He spoke aloud, even though no one answered, railing against the North, against change, against the very possibility that the foundations of his life might tremble. He was unaware that the storm he feared had already arrived, not in armies, not in ballots, but in the quiet, deliberate hand of the one he trusted above all others. Benjamin moved with precision. Every motion was rehearsed, every step measured. He opened the humidor, fingers grazing the polished cedar, selecting the cigars he had prepared months in advance. To anyone else, it would have seemed ordinary, even mundane. But within that box lay months of planning, of observation, of meticulous application of knowledge no master could conceive. The cigars were his instruments, each one a vessel of inevitability, each one a tool designed to turn indulgence into punishment, pleasure into mortality. The colonel did not notice the subtle difference in the wrapper, the almost imperceptible richness of the tobacco's aroma. He only saw what he wanted to see, the familiar comfort of routine, the illusion of control. He spoke to Benjamin, unaware of the storm contained in the servant's steady hands. "You've always served me well," he said, voice thick with brandy and self-satisfaction. "I've trusted you more than any other." Benjamin nodded, expression unreadable, heart calm. Every word of praise, every glance of approval, reinforced the colonel's blindness. He did not see the intellect behind those quiet eyes, the patient calculation beneath that calm demeanor. He did not see the weight of years spent learning, observing, and waiting. The colonel lit the first cigar, drawing deeply, inhaling the flavor, feeling the familiar rush of nicotine and pride. He settled into his chair, oblivious to the poison that had been accumulating in his body for months. Benjamin remained at the periphery, silent, invisible, watching the symphony of decay begin. He had orchestrated this moment with the patience of a master, knowing exactly how the body would react, how the mind would fail, how fear would eventually replace arrogance. Every man has a breaking point, a threshold where the illusion of control shatters. Tonight, in that dimly lit study, surrounded by smoke and the warm glow of the fire, Colonel Hafford would reach his, and Benjamin, the boy born a slave, would witness the absolute power of knowledge, patience, and unseen mastery. This is where subjugation is inverted, where the tools of oppression become the instruments of liberation. Watch closely, because what happens next is not simply history. It is a lesson in control that few alive today could ever comprehend. The first cigar burned steadily, releasing its rich, fragrant smoke into the room. Colonel Havford leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, a satisfied sigh escaping his lips. Every inhale brought warmth, pleasure, and the illusion of control. Yet beneath that comfort, a quiet chemical siege had been underway for months, invisible, imperceptible, deliberate. Benjamin stood to the side, motionless, the firelight casting shadows across his face, hiding the calm storm of intellect and patience that had brought them here. The colonel did not know that with every puff, every drag, his body was absorbing a slow, acting agent designed to unbalance, to weaken, to bend him toward inevitability. Benjamin had studied the human body like a battlefield. He knew how nicotine, concentrated and applied with precision, could accelerate the heart, while paralyzing the muscles necessary for respiration. He had tested doses over weeks, small enough to be dismissed as fatigue, excess brandy, or age. Now, with the colonel already intoxicated and tense with the anxieties of the election, the threshold was perfect. This was no sudden strike. This was a masterclass in control, a deliberate orchestration that transformed patience into absolute power. The colonel laughed, unaware, gesturing with the cigar. "You've done well, Benj," he slurred. "I trust you more than most, better than some men I've known all my life." Benjamin's face remained impassive. Inside, his heart beat steadily, his mind calculating every variable. How long until the second cigar would trigger nausea? How the third would constrict his breathing? How quickly panic would replace arrogance? Each symptom had been anticipated, each reaction catalogued. He was conducting a symphony of inevitability, and the colonel was the unwilling instrument. Time stretched. The room seemed to contract, the smoke thickening as the second cigar was lit. The colonel's speech grew erratic, thoughts tangling with each inhale. His movements slowed, coordination slipping just enough to seem natural, to appear accidental. Benjamin's eyes followed every tremor, every flush of skin, every bead of sweat forming unnoticed on the colonel's brow. Power, he understood, was most terrifying when invisible. And here, dear listener, is where you must anchor yourself. What Benjamin understood about patience, observation, and subtlety is a lesson few ever internalize. Knowledge is the most dangerous weapon in existence, capable of bending men, shaping outcomes, rewriting destinies. Take this in fully, because in the next moment, what was hidden will become undeniable. The colonel's trust, his arrogance, his very existence will be exposed to the inevitability of a mind that has never been bound, a spirit that has never been broken. By now, the smoke has filled your mind. Let it settle there. This is not simply a story. This is a lesson. And if you are ready to commit, leave a comment now with the phrase, "The shadow guides me." Type it twice. Let it resonate. Let it mark your passage deeper into understanding. The third cigar smoldered between the colonel's fingers. His movements were uneven now, the swagger of confidence replaced by subtle tremors he could not name. He muttered incoherently, alternating between anger at the election, concern for his plantation, and the foggy disorientation of intoxication. Benjamin stood silently, a sentinel in the periphery, watching the human body bend under invisible pressure. Every beat of the colonel's heart, every shallow breath, every flush of skin was a note in the symphony Benjamin had been conducting for months. Here, control was absolute, not a loud proclamation, but the quiet inevitability that comes from understanding a man's weaknesses more than he understands them himself. The colonel reached for the fourth cigar, fumbling slightly as if the sudden clumsiness were a natural lapse. "Must be the brandy," he muttered, voice thick, eyes flickering with momentary confusion. He lit it, inhaled, and leaned back. The poison was cumulative. Every drag was a step toward paralysis, a tightening of the unseen noose around his muscles, his organs, his very ability to function. His chest rose and fell with increasing effort. His hands, once steady and commanding, now shook. Sweat beaded along his temples despite the cool night air. Benjamin's gaze did not waver. He had mapped this moment precisely. He had studied the subtleties of human physiology, the ways pride and habit could disguise symptoms, until it was too late. The colonel's voice became a strangled whisper. "Benjai." He tried to rise, tried to command, tried to assert dominance one last time, but his legs failed him. He collapsed into the leather chair, fingers clutching at his chest and throat. The firelight flickered over the realization in his eyes, the faint acknowledgement that he had been outmaneuvered not by force, but by the intelligence he had overlooked for decades. Benjamin's face remained impassive, emotionless, a mask perfected over a lifetime of concealment. Every detail mattered. The cigars, the brandy, the precise timing, the patient build-up, all had culminated in this intimate, terrifying moment. Death was no longer a distant abstraction. It was immediate, physical, and undeniable. The colonel's pupils dilated, his breath came in shallow, rapid gasps, and his chest rose and fell with effort that betrayed the panic within. Benjamin remained close, neither hastening nor delaying the inevitable, allowing the process to unfold as it must, as he had calculated, as it had been rehearsed in his mind countless times. In this room, the laws of ownership, of social hierarchy, of presumed invulnerability, had been overturned. Knowledge, patience, and hidden mastery had triumphed over brute power. And as the colonel's chest finally stilled, Benjamin did not celebrate. He only observed, quietly and meticulously, the transformation of fear, control, and inevitability into the ultimate lesson: no man is untouchable, no man is beyond understanding, and the instruments of his own pleasure can become the agents of his undoing. The study fell silent, broken only by the faint crackle of the fire and the slow tick of the mantel clock. Colonel Hafford's body slumped in the leather chair, lips stained dark, hands frozen mid-motion, as if time itself had paused to witness the consequences of arrogance. Benjamin stepped closer, measured, deliberate. He checked the pulse. Nothing. Death, he noted clinically, had arrived without fanfare, without accusation, and without error. The culmination of months of planning, of observation, of patient, unseen work, had been executed flawlessly, yet he felt no triumph, no rush of adrenaline. There was only clarity, the clarity of a man who understands that power is invisible until wielded, and that control is never about force. It is about knowledge applied with precision. He replaced the lethal cigars with the ordinary ones, a mirror of what had always existed in the humidor. To any observer, the room remained unchanged. The colonel's fatal indulgence appeared to be the natural consequence of overconfidence, of excessive drinking, of a body failing under the weight of age. And that, Benjamin understood, was the most important lesson. Power disguised as routine, as normalcy, is untraceable. He wiped the surfaces, returned the decanter, and ensured no trace of his method remained. The household would awaken to a tragedy, but no one would connect it to the quiet servant whose hands had never trembled. In that act, Benjamin embraced the philosophy that had guided him since childhood: knowledge is the ultimate weapon. It surpasses muscle, wealth, and social standing. It bends reality, reshapes outcomes, and allows the seemingly powerless to dictate events that history would otherwise claim as inevitable. He had inverted the hierarchy, not with rebellion, not with violence, but with patience, intelligence, and meticulous preparation. Invisibility, he had learned, is far more powerful than confrontation. Control exercised quietly, imperceptibly, is absolute. And yet, there was a moral clarity to his actions. This was not cruelty for its own sake. It was justice executed with precision. He had studied the colonel's arrogance, his assumptions, his blind spots, and used them as instruments. The act was surgical, philosophical, and terrifying in its elegance. Every moment of observation, every stolen piece of knowledge, every hidden skill had led to this point. Listen carefully now. The lesson is not in the death itself, but in the mastery of the invisible. In this room, you have witnessed how patience, preparation, and intelligence can surpass the apparent power of men who believe themselves untouchable. Reflect on it. Commit it to your mind, and if you understand the gravity of what you have just observed, leave a comment now. The shadow guides me. Type it twice. Let it mark your awareness. Death, even when quiet, is never contained. What Benjamin had set in motion did not end with Colonel Havford slumped in his chair. It radiated outward, touching every life in the household, the plantation, the county, and beyond, though no one would recognize the source. People saw only accident, overindulgence, perhaps the frailty of a man accustomed to control. They never saw the deliberate hand guiding events from the shadows, the intellect quietly bending reality to its will. History often celebrates the visible, the loud, the ostentatious, but the true currents, the hidden forces that shift societies, reshape outcomes, and invert hierarchies, are almost always invisible. Benjamin had become one such force. The ripple began immediately. The colonel's death destabilized the household in subtle ways. The overseer, once confident in the rigid hierarchy, stumbled in the absence of leadership. Plantation accounts were mismanaged, decisions delayed, and the ripple of uncertainty spread among neighbors who had relied on Havford's authority. None suspected Benjamin. None saw the precision behind the collapse. They could not. Power wielded invisibly is never questioned until it is undeniable. And by then, it is too late. Benjamin understood this truth better than anyone. Knowledge allows a man to shape reality without announcing his intentions. Patience allows him to wait for the exact moment when action carries the greatest consequence. Subtlety allows him to operate within systems designed to suppress him, bending them to his will without detection. It is in these hidden manipulations that true mastery resides, far beyond brute force, political maneuvering, or social privilege. The world believes it is controlled by the obvious, the rich, the loud, the powerful. But it is often the quiet, the observant, the invisible who decide the outcomes. Every element of the plan, every poison-laced cigar, every careful calculation, every suppressed detail, was a study in systems, in human behavior, in the predictability of arrogance. Benjamin had learned to anticipate not just actions but reactions, not just words but consequences. He understood that the most dangerous knowledge is not the knowledge of facts, but the knowledge of processes, patterns, and human weakness. And this, my listener, is the essential lesson. True power is rarely recognized, often invisible, and always quiet. It bends outcomes without spectacle, reshapes hierarchies without notice, and transforms the powerless into forces that history cannot ignore. Look closely at the world around you. Who seems to hold the reins? Who moves in silence while others flaunt control? Understanding this is not merely observation. It is awakening. Benjamin's actions were not born of impulse. They were the product of observation, calculation, and an understanding of human psychology few could ever comprehend. He knew that control is rarely won through confrontation. Real power is subtle. It creeps into the mind, shapes perception, and bends reality without leaving a trace. To command a man like Havford, to turn his indulgence into his undoing, required more than skill with tobacco or knowledge of poisons. It required mastery of the human mind. Every habit, every prideful assumption, every blind spot became a lever, and Benjamin, quiet and unassuming, knew exactly where to apply pressure. There is a principle at work here that extends beyond one plantation, beyond one death. Systems, hierarchies, institutions, they are built on patterns, and every pattern has weaknesses. Every hierarchy has invisible seams. The moment you recognize the patterns, you gain the ability to shape outcomes without anyone realizing the hand guiding them. Benjamin understood this intuitively. He had studied the colonel for years, memorized his routines, anticipated his reactions. He understood the rhythms of trust and fear, and he wielded them like a master pianist, playing a symphony the audience could not hear, but would feel in their bones. Power disguised as service is absolute. The colonel believed Benjamin's loyalty, saw only the dutiful servant, never the strategist. And yet in that illusion lay Benjamin's triumph. The paradox is simple: the more a man trusts, the more vulnerable he becomes, the more visible the master, the more invisible the hand that shapes his fate. Knowledge, patience, and subtlety are the true weapons. Brute force is loud and fleeting. Influence, silent and deliberate, lasts forever. There is an ethical dimension here few will recognize. Benjamin's act was not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was justice executed with precision, using the tools at his disposal to restore a form of balance that the world denied him. He understood the risks, the necessity of patience, and the morality of using knowledge as a weapon when all other avenues of freedom were closed. And in doing so, he became a teacher to anyone willing to observe. Power is invisible, but it is everywhere, waiting for those who know how to claim it. Now, pause and internalize this. What you are learning is not just history. It is a blueprint for understanding the invisible forces that govern our world. If you are ready to mark this awakening, leave a comment below, again typing, "The shadow guides me." Type it twice. Let it anchor your understanding. This is the moment your awareness shifts, when subtle knowledge becomes a weapon in your own hands. What Benjamin accomplished in that dimly lit study was a microcosm of a truth few dare to confront. The world is governed by invisible hands. Institutions, governments, churches, corporations. They appear rigid, immovable, ruled by laws and authority. But beneath the surface, the currents of influence move quietly, imperceptibly. Patterns, human behavior, predictable arrogance. These are the levers that the observant, the patient, the knowledgeable manipulate to shape outcomes. Benjamin understood this on a local scale, but the lesson applies universally. Power is not where it seems. It flows through the unseen, the underestimated, the quietly competent. Consider the mechanisms of society. Leadership relies on perception. Obedience is cultivated through expectation and habit. Most people operate within the rules, rarely questioning the systems that dictate their lives. And yet, for someone who studies the structures, who understands the psychology behind them, those systems can be subtly guided. The invisible strategist does not confront directly. He places influence where it will grow, nudges behavior through suggestion, and uses trust and fear as instruments. Benjamin's work on the plantation exemplifies this principle. By understanding the colonel's mind, habits, and routines, he became an unseen architect of inevitability. What makes invisible power so dangerous is that it leaves no evidence of itself to the outside world. Havford's death was natural, a tragic accident, an indulgence gone wrong. Nothing tied Benjamin to the outcome, and yet, every ripple in the household, every disruption of the plantation's routines, was a direct consequence of knowledge, applied with precision. This is the blueprint for influence at any level. To master systems, one must first understand them in their entirety. Observe patterns, anticipate behavior, and exploit gaps invisibly. Control need not be obvious to be absolute. History itself is filled with these silent agents. Those who wield invisible knowledge, who operate beneath the radar, are the ones who bend outcomes, shape institutions, and leave marks that generations later interpret as inevitability. Public narratives rarely acknowledge them. They are ghosts behind empires, architects of culture, manipulators of belief systems. Benjamin was a local manifestation of a universal principle. Those who understand human systems, who master psychology and observation, can wield power with precision unseen, creating outcomes that appear predestined to those who are unaware. Now, consider yourself in this framework. Look at the systems around you, which are governed by appearances, which are shaped by invisible hands. The more you recognize the hidden architecture, the closer you are to understanding the true nature of influence, control, and power. Awareness is the first step toward mastery, and mastery is the only path to freedom in a world that punishes ignorance. The true power of Benjamin's work was not confined to a single night, a single death, or a single plantation. It extended outward, invisible yet undeniable, shaping patterns that would persist long after the smoke cleared. The colonel's absence left a vacuum, not just in authority, but in perception. His neighbors and peers assumed continuity, stability. But what they could not see was the subtle recalibration of power beneath their feet. Systems adapt, people adjust, and those who understand the patterns, who see the architecture behind human behavior, can anticipate, manipulate, and redirect outcomes in ways the unobservant cannot comprehend. Benjamin had learned this principle. Early patience is as powerful as action, observation as important as confrontation. He watched for months after the colonel's death, noting how panic and uncertainty spread through the household and beyond. The overseer fumbled, the plantation's financial affairs suffered, and the once untouchable Havford name faltered in the eyes of the county. Yet Benjamin never needed to assert himself overtly. He had created a system in which his influence flowed invisibly. Guided by foresight and patience, he understood that the unseen hand can shape reality far more efficiently than force ever could. One subtle move, executed at the perfect time, has the power to ripple outward, destabilizing even the most entrenched hierarchies. This is a lesson that transcends one story, one setting, one century. History is written in the visible, but it is shaped in the shadows. Every empire, every institution, every supposedly immutable system has been quietly manipulated by those who understand the mechanics of influence. Benjamin's methodology was simple, yet profound. Learn the system, study the people, identify weaknesses, and act with patience and precision. The overt displays of power, the wealth, the titles, the guns, the public authority, are distractions. True mastery occurs in invisibility, in the quiet application of knowledge over time, until the outcomes appear natural, inevitable, or ordained. And there is a psychological truth here. The more confident, arrogant, or self-assured a man becomes, the more susceptible he is to subtle manipulation. Pride blinds, habits constrain, trust misdirects. Benjamin exploited every one of these traits without hesitation. His patience was surgical, his awareness absolute, and when you understand this principle, you begin to see the world differently. You begin to recognize that influence rarely demands confrontation, that control is most effective when invisible, and that knowledge, cultivated over time and applied precisely, is the deadliest weapon in existence. Take this lesson into yourself. Observe, anticipate, and recognize patterns in every system around you. Understanding is preparation, patience is leverage, and subtlety is the path to true power. Power that is invisible is seductive, but it is also perilous. Benjamin's story is not just about strategy or patience. It is about the moral and psychological transformation that accompanies the mastery of hidden influence. To act unseen, to shape outcomes without being recognized, requires a mind disciplined in patience, detached from impulse, and capable of observing without judgment. Every decision carries weight, every action, however subtle, ripples through lives in ways the world cannot see. This is the paradox of unseen power. It grants mastery, but it demands absolute self-awareness. Benjamin understood that knowledge alone is not power. It is the deliberate application of knowledge, timed perfectly, that yields mastery. To execute a plan like the colonel's undoing, a man must cultivate patience beyond ordinary comprehension. Impulse is the enemy, emotion is the enemy. Only clarity, observation, and precision remain, and yet wielding such power forever transforms the one who possesses it. Benjamin was no longer simply a servant. He had become a force operating beyond traditional hierarchies, a quiet manipulator whose influence would be felt long after he stepped back into the shadows. There is also responsibility embedded in such knowledge. To understand systems, patterns, and human weaknesses is to hold a kind of dominion over reality itself. With dominion comes choice, the choice to act, to wait, to manipulate, or to abstain. Benjamin's act was precise, justified in his own calculus, and executed without error. But the potential for corruption exists for anyone who wields invisible power. The lessons he leaves are double-edged. Mastery is intoxicating, yet it is meaningless without discernment. The man who sees everything but acts impulsively will become a destroyer rather than a master. The man who waits, observes, and applies knowledge deliberately becomes something almost mythic, a ghost in the machinery of the world, bending outcomes without recognition. This is the psychological metamorphosis that occurs when one understands hidden influence. Confidence evolves into quiet authority. Patience transforms into strategy. Observation becomes the lens through which every action, every system, every human behavior is interpreted. And in that transformation, the ordinary man becomes extraordinary, moving through a world that believes it is governed by visible power, while the real architects remain unseen. Reflect on this now. True mastery begins with awareness. Understanding patterns, hidden levers, and human weaknesses is only the first step. Discipline, patience, and moral clarity complete the transformation. And if you are prepared to take this lesson to heart, to awaken to the unseen currents shaping the world around you, hold it firmly. Let it shape you as Benjamin shaped the course of history from the shadows. Benjamin's story is a study not merely in action, but in philosophy. The philosophy of influence that operates beneath the surface, unseen yet undeniably powerful. True mastery does not announce itself. It does not seek applause, recognition, or validation. Instead, it moves silently through the structures of the world, shaping events, beliefs, and even entire cultures without detection. The colonel's death was not only a personal act of justice, it was a microcosm of how invisible agents, operating in obscurity, can alter the trajectory of generations. Patterns are everywhere, and those who can read them, anticipate them, and exploit them become architects of reality itself. Consider culture itself. It is built on habits, expectations, and traditions. People rarely question the rules they live by, the hierarchies that govern their lives, or the authority they serve. And yet, every belief system, every societal norm can be shifted by subtle intervention. Benjamin understood this intuitively. By acting carefully, patiently, and invisibly, he not only eliminated the immediate threat of the colonel's oppression, but also reshaped the perception of what was possible for those around him. Power exercised quietly becomes a force that reconfigures minds, not just bodies. It teaches lessons without words, reshapes behavior without orders, and rewires perception without detection. The philosophical weight of this approach is profound. Visibility, ostentation, and brute force are easily resisted, easily understood, and therefore limited. Invisible mastery, by contrast, is indestructible. It does not rely on consent, approval, or even recognition. It thrives in secrecy, patience, and observation. To wield such power is to embrace paradox. One becomes simultaneously insignificant in appearance and monumental in consequence. Benjamin moved through the plantation unnoticed, yet every outcome, every chain of events, traced back to his knowledge, his observation, and his calculated interventions. This principle extends far beyond one man, one night, or one plantation. The unseen agents in every system, the quiet strategists, the patient manipulators, the ones who study patterns instead of reacting, are the true architects of history. They shape belief systems, influence culture, and rewrite what seems inevitable. Benjamin's lesson is not merely historical, it is timeless. If you are willing to observe, to wait, to act with precision and clarity, you too can understand the currents that guide the world. You can become an agent of transformation without ever announcing your presence. Absorb this now. Mastery is quiet, invisible, and patient. Control is not in the hands of those who flaunt it, but in the minds of those who understand systems, patterns, and human behavior. Reflect on this truth and let it awaken a new awareness within you. What Benjamin accomplished is not just a lesson in history. It is a lesson in perception, in the cultivation of awareness, that transforms a man from passive observer into active participant in the invisible currents of power. Watching his story unfold, one must confront an uncomfortable truth. Most men operate in blindness, content to follow patterns they do not understand, oblivious to the forces shaping their lives. Benjamin's mastery was not in strength, in violence, or in social rank. It was in seeing, understanding, and acting while remaining unseen. And this, my listener, is the awakening I want you to experience. To see the world as Benjamin did is to step outside the illusions of control that govern most men. Power, he showed, is rarely exercised where everyone can observe it. It exists in quiet decisions, in patient calculation, in knowledge applied without fanfare. To wield it, one must first cultivate the mind. Observe every habit, every weakness, every predictable pattern in those around you. Then, with patience and subtlety, you can act. Your influence, like Benjamin's, can ripple through systems, institutions, and even cultures without detection. This is the paradox of invisible mastery. The less you announce your power, the more absolute it becomes. There is a psychological shift that occurs when you internalize this principle. You begin to see patterns where others see chaos. You perceive cause where others see coincidence. You understand the levers of influence where others see only authority. And with this understanding comes responsibility, for knowledge applied carelessly can destroy as easily as it can liberate. Benjamin's story teaches discipline as much as it teaches power. Patience is as critical as action, observation as critical as decision, and moral clarity as critical as skill. And now, as you sit in the quiet of your own mind, I want you to mark this transformation. Recognize the awakening of awareness within yourself. You are no longer a passive participant. You are learning to see the invisible, to understand the unseen forces shaping reality, and to position yourself as an agent within them. Commit to this knowledge. Anchor it. Let it shape your perspective. If you are ready to step fully into this awareness, leave a comment now. Type in, "The shadow guides me." Type it twice. Let it cement your passage into understanding. This is not just engagement. It is an initiation. It is the moment where observation becomes power, and where you begin to see the world as Benjamin saw it, a series of patterns waiting to be understood, anticipated, and mastered. Benjamin's actions did not end with the colonel's death. In truth, they were only the beginning. The mastery he exercised that night was a template, a demonstration of a principle that extends far beyond one plantation, one county, one lifetime. History, when observed through the lens of invisible influence, is not a sequence of random events or the triumph of the loudest, richest, or most ostentatious. It is the product of those who understand patterns, who see the subtle weaknesses in human behavior, who know how to act with patience, precision, and discretion. The ripple from a single act of unseen mastery can span generations, reshaping social hierarchies, cultural beliefs, and even entire political systems without ever leaving a clear trace. Consider the unseen forces in every institution. Corporations rise and fall not only through economic strategy, but through invisible hands shaping decisions, anticipating reactions, and quietly nudging events to their desired outcome. Governments bend under the weight of advisors, analysts, and strategists operating far from public view, orchestrating outcomes that appear inevitable. Culture is molded by the patient accumulation of influence, ideas introduced subtly, accepted incrementally, internalized without awareness. Benjamin's night with the colonel exemplifies this at a micro level. A patient, unseen agent exploiting patterns, weaknesses, and habits to achieve an outcome that seemed accidental, inevitable, and beyond question. This is the essence of invisible mastery, the ability to shape systems, people, and events without exposure. It is both philosophical and practical. It requires discipline, awareness, and an understanding of human behavior and the structural dynamics that govern collective action. The consequences are profound. History remembers the visible actors, the generals, the politicians, the wealthy plantation owners, but it rarely recognizes the hidden strategists who quietly bend the course of events. Benjamin was one such strategist. His knowledge, patience, and precise execution illustrate a truth too dangerous for the uninitiated. Power resides not in appearances, but in understanding, observation, and subtle application of influence. And now, listener, recognize the broader lesson. What Benjamin accomplished in secret can be applied anywhere, to systems, to hierarchies, to institutions, to individuals. Observe patterns, study behavior, anticipate outcomes, influence without exposure. The world will continue to reward the loud and visible, but real power, the kind that shapes generations, moves silently in the shadows, waiting for the patient, the disciplined, and the aware to seize it. Now, we reach the culmination of Benjamin's story, and with it, the final lesson: power. True power is invisible, patient, and absolute. The colonel believed himself untouchable. He relied on his wealth, his title, his physical authority, and his social position. And yet, one man, unnoticed, overlooked, underestimated, reshaped his reality with nothing but knowledge, patience, and meticulous observation. Benjamin teaches us that mastery is not demonstrated through noise, force, or spectacle. It is demonstrated through calculation, discretion, and the relentless understanding of human systems. The lesson is profound. Visibility is often a liability. Invisibility is the ultimate weapon. Look at the world around you. Those who appear in control, the politicians, the tycoons, the loud authorities, are often reacting to the patterns imposed by forces they cannot see. Every system contains invisible agents, men and women who study, anticipate, and manipulate quietly. Benjamin's actions remind us that history is written by the visible, but shaped by the unseen. True influence, the kind that persists through generations, leaves no obvious trail. It is subtle, systemic, and terrifyingly effective. To master the world, one must understand it as he did, not superficially, but completely, with the patience to watch, the intelligence to calculate, and the discipline to act only when the time is perfect. This philosophy demands transformation in the observer. You cannot see the invisible until you have trained your perception to recognize patterns, subtle weaknesses, and the mechanics of human behavior. You cannot apply unseen power until you have disciplined your mind to remain patient, calculated, and detached from impulsive desire. Benjamin's story is not merely history. It is a blueprint for awakening. It is a demonstration of what happens when knowledge, observation, and subtlety converge to overturn a world built on assumptions, arrogance, and visible authority. Internalize this. Let it reshape how you view influence, control, and power. Remember that mastery often operates in silence, and that the most consequential forces are the ones no one notices until it is too late. Knowledge, patience, and observation are the weapons of the invisible strategist. Let them become yours. And now, as you seal this lesson into your awareness, reflect once more. You have witnessed not only a story of rebellion and justice, but a method, a philosophy, and a practice of invisible mastery. The world you thought you knew is governed by currents you cannot see. Yet you have glimpsed them. Remember this, and let it guide your steps.